I was never meant to be part of the family, not really. They made that clear in small ways at first. Like how my plate was always served last, or how I was told to clean up after every meal while my siblings lounged on velvet couches. But it wasn't until that Christmas, when my mother stood in front of everyone and said I was too poor to sit at the family table, that the mask of love slipped away completely. She laughed. They all laughed. And I realized then, as my eyes welled up with tears and I carried my paper plate to the corridor to eat alone, that love in this house came with a price tag. And I was bankrupt. But they didn't know that humiliation would become my greatest weapon. Because today, I own that estate. And before she draws her last breath, my mother will know what it feels like to be poor, truly poor. Not in money, but in power, dignity, and family. My name is Mide, and I was born the product of an affair. My father, Chief Benson Owolabi, was a powerful real estate tycoon in Ibadan, respected, feared, and filthy rich. He had a wife, a mansion, and 3 children before he met my mother, who worked as a receptionist in one of his companies. Their relationship was never supposed to be anything serious. I wasn't supposed to exist. But when my mother got pregnant and refused to terminate, things got messy. My father, under pressure from his legal wife, provided hush money and a small flat in Bodija, but no claim to his name. Growing up, I heard stories of my half-siblings going to expensive schools, traveling abroad every summer, and hosting birthday parties in hotels. Meanwhile, my mother and I survived on Accra sales and second-hand clothes. But she was proud. She never begged. She taught me one thing early: we might not have money, Mide, but we have our dignity. That dignity cracked the day my mother died of breast cancer. We couldn't afford proper treatment. The pain, the suffering, all while my father lived 10 minutes away in a mansion with 6 bedrooms and 3 cars. I was 17. With no parents, no home, and no inheritance, I should have been broken. But pain, I learned, sharpens ambition. I worked odd jobs, hawking, cleaning, typing CVs in cybercafes. I never had enough to eat, but I had enough to dream. I studied at night, slept in kiosks sometimes, and used abandoned classrooms as shelters. Eventually, I got a government scholarship for brilliant but underprivileged students. That took me to university. I studied business administration, and I devoured every page like it was revenge served on paper. While others chased relationships and parties, I chased mentors, investment seminars, and internships. I had no time for distractions. At 24, I got a job in a small tech startup in Lagos. By 28, I had launched my own real estate firm with a loan I hustled from 3 angel investors I met at a networking event. I worked like a madman, 80 hours a week, skipping sleep, skipping meals, until my company became profitable. Not just profitable. Dominant. By 33, I had made my first billion. Quietly. Silently. While the family that rejected me was crumbling from within. It started with whispers. My father had suffered a stroke, and there was chaos in the Owolabi family. His health was declining, and the empire was in disarray. His sons were incompetent, burning money on parties and fake business ventures. The first daughter was in a toxic marriage and barely visited. And my mother, the woman who once stood by my father's side, once called me a mistake when she found out who I was now the acting matriarch of a crumbling kingdom. I watched from afar. And I waited. Then came the Christmas that changed everything. I received a formal invitation from the Owolabis, well, technically from my father's secretary. It was a formality. A way to look good for the press, to show the family unity they never truly had. I wasn't meant to come. But I did. I wore a clean white kaftan, drove up in a Range Rover I had paid for in cash, and walked into the Owolabi estate with my head high. The butler looked confused, but I smiled politely. I was escorted to the living room where the others sat. My half-siblings stared at me like I was a ghost. Their mother, my stepmother, eyed me with thinly veiled disgust. "Mide," she scoffed. What are you doing here? Didn't you send me an invite? I asked calmly. She looked at her assistant and back at me. Well, we don't have enough space at the table, she added sharply. And besides, your mother didn't leave you with any manners, did she? Coming here like this? I froze. The room went quiet. Then she said it, loud enough for the staff to hear. You're too poor to sit with the family. Maybe take a seat outside? My siblings chuckled. Even the cousins joined in. I smiled. That was the moment. That was when I decided, this house, this family, this empire, it will all belong to me. 6 months later, Chief Benson Owolabi passed away. The funeral was elaborate, as expected. Lavish decorations, dignitaries, press coverage, and of course, the reading of the will. They expected the will to split the estate between the legitimate children. And it did, initially. But they didn't count on one thing: my father had rewritten the will just before he died. Quietly. Legally. After I visited him 3 months prior. He was weak, in pain, and scared. But he remembered. He remembered the little boy with big eyes who used to wait outside his gate just to see him drive by. He remembered how he left me and my mother to rot. And in his final days, he wanted to make amends. So, he transferred 60% of his estate to me, including the house. The family was stunned. My stepmother screamed. My half-brothers called it fake. But the lawyer, who was my lawyer by then, showed the documents, the signatures, the video recordings. They had nothing. I had everything. But I wasn't done. I didn't just own the house. I moved in. I didn't kick them out. Not yet. Instead, I renovated everything. The master bedroom became mine. I upgraded the servants' quarters. I changed the security team. I hosted weekly board meetings at the dining table and made sure they saw me at the head of it every time. My stepmother was now a guest in the house she once ruled. One evening, I invited the entire family to dinner. I hired a private chef. Set a long oak table in the garden. Soft lights. Expensive wine. They arrived reluctantly, dressed up in fake smiles. When it was time to sit, I stood up and cleared my throat. Before we eat, I'd like to make a quick announcement, I said. They looked confused. I've decided to rewrite the will again. Eyes widened. There's a new clause: when in this family disrespects me, or refers to my mother as that woman again, they lose their share permanently. Silence. And from now on, I added, everyone eats together. No one is too poor to sit at the table. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine? Mine was served with jollof rice, chilled wine, and a side of poetic justice. But it wasn't just about the money. Or the power. Or the house. It was about reminding them that people are not defined by the circumstances they were born into, but by the courage they choose to rise with. I didn't just rewrite the will. I rewrote my worth. And in doing so, I made sure that no child, no matter how unwanted, ever has to sit outside their own family's table again. Owning the estate was only the beginning. What I wanted wasn't just property, it was peace. But peace doesn't come easily when you're surrounded by vultures. After my father's death, the bitterness in the house grew like mold. My stepmother sulked around, her face constantly twisted in contempt. My half-brothers tried to undermine me at every board meeting, and my half-sister stopped showing up altogether. They had been raised to believe they were royalty, and I was the bastard child who didn't deserve a seat at the table. But reality had changed. Still, instead of kicking them out, I did something far more cruel. I put them to work. Every single one of them. Deo, the eldest, was now my junior property manager, reporting directly to me. He hated it. He could barely read financial reports, and I made no effort to simplify them. He'd sit in meetings red-faced, fumbling numbers, while I corrected him in front of staff. Tund, the second son, used to party with celebrities. I made him head of tenant relations in our low-income housing projects. Every day he was forced to walk through slums, negotiating rents with people he would have once called dirty peasants. And as for my stepmother? I reduced her monthly allowance by 80%. Let's practice humility, I told her. She tried to sue. The case was thrown out. The will was airtight. Weeks turned into months. Gradually, the house became quieter. The fighting stopped. But not because they'd found peace, because they had accepted defeat. And yet, I wasn't satisfied. One night, I walked into the living room and found my stepmother alone. The power was out temporarily due to maintenance. She was sitting by candlelight, staring at an old family portrait, my father, her, and their children. I was not in it. I was angry, she said quietly. I didn't speak. He loved your mother. Not me. Even after all these years, he still remembered her. That's why I hated you. I still didn't speak. Then she looked up at me, eyes no longer proud, but hollow. Congratulations, Mide. You've won. I nodded. No. I didn't win. I just survived. That's the difference between us. The next day, I began preparing the final step of my plan. It wasn't about more humiliation. It was about legacy. I met with my legal team and rewrote the family trust. Instead of keeping the estate tied to bloodlines, I redirected 40% of all future company profits to fund scholarships for underprivileged children like me. I renamed the mansion Mama Dupe House after my mother. And I had a plaque installed at the entrance. In honor of the woman who raised a king with nothing but dignity and fire. The unveiling of Mama Dupe House shook the entire city. Journalists flocked to the estate when they caught wind of the transformation. Everyone wanted to know why the once-forgotten son of a powerful tycoon had not only claimed his birthright but renamed the ancestral mansion after the woman everyone else had erased from history. At the press conference, I stood before cameras, microphones, and flashing lights, but I wasn't there for fame. I was there to speak for every child who had been treated like a stain. My mother was never invited to sit at this table, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. But today, she owns it. Silence. She sold Accra by the roadside. She died without a proper bed, while my father lay in silk sheets. But she raised me with integrity, with love, and with the kind of strength that no fortune could ever buy. The crowd clapped slowly. Then wildly. Behind them, my half-siblings watched with unreadable expressions. My stepmother wasn't there. Rumors said she had left the estate for good, choosing to move into a modest flat in Osogbo, away from the whispers of society. I didn't miss her. But I hoped she finally found the humility she never allowed herself to learn. 2 years passed. The scholarship fund I started, the Dupe Foundation, grew rapidly. Hundreds of students across Nigeria got opportunities to study in good schools, some even abroad. Many of them reminded me of myself, scrappy, hungry, determined. They came from ghettos, villages, and broken homes, but with the kind of fire that could light a nation. One afternoon, I walked through one of our newly built community libraries. A little girl ran up to me with a paper in her hand. "Uncle Mide," she smiled. "I wrote this for you." I took it. It was a drawing, a stick figure version of me holding hands with a woman labeled Mama Dupe. At the top, it read, "Thank you for making us feel seen." I blinked back tears. For all the boardroom victories, business deals, and courtroom wins, this moment was what truly made me feel wealthy. I still live in the Owolabi estate. But the energy is different now. It is no longer a palace of pride and secrets. It is a home. On Sunday evenings, I host children from the foundation. We eat at the same long table that once excluded me. The laughter, the stories, the joy, it's real. And whenever anyone tries to sit alone, I remind them gently. There's always space at this table. For everyone. In the end, I learned that revenge might satisfy, but healing builds legacies. I could have destroyed them completely. But I chose something bigger. I chose to rewrite the story. Not just for myself, but for the countless nameless, voiceless children who believe they're too poor to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. To them, I say this. You don't need a golden spoon to own the table. Sometimes, all you need is the fire to build your own. And one day, they'll be the ones knocking on your door.